And then when I would complain to him about how difficult it was, he would just say, "You can do it, you can do it." It would be very, very encouraging to me to keep going. And I'm telling him, well, I'm a mess here. You know, I need something other than keep going. But that's all that I really got from him. And so I just kept going. I kept doing it. I spent, before I started functioning in this way here, I spent 30 years leading study groups. Did a little bit of teaching, but very little. I basically did what my teacher told me to do. I sat in a group of people and we read out of his books and his book or his writings and other writings and studied and helped people understand that material. That's how I spent the last 30 years plus. And part of the, part of the time I would go into retreat and practice meditation, do sitting meditation for long periods of time. So I think it's difficult. One of the ways of saying it is some people are not ready for this. They really don't want to they don't really want to get that close to that because it's threatening. What if, and if the teacher is not teaching in the way we would like, if we're asking one thing and they're responding a certain way, instead of working with that, contemplating that, listening to what that answer was and going deeper into that, trying to see what that was, instead we object to it. We think they should be answering differently. Or they don't really want to receive those teachings. I want to receive some other teachings. I want some other way of working. Or we might go, sometimes called the spiritual supermarket. We might go from one teacher to the next, or from one teaching situation, looking for that ideal teacher that sometimes expressed as, well, they think the same way I do. Well, the teacher isn't likely to think the same way you do. That's part of the difficulty. So, yes. Michael?
You used the word devotion.
Yes.
Would you, in his question, would that also be surrender?
Surrender is not something the ego can do. It would like to act like it's surrendering, but the ego can't do it because the ego is always there. And the reason the ego is not there is it's not real. It's not a solid entity. It is constantly shifting. I call it discontinuous identity. It's always changing and taking on a new mask, a new face, a new appearance. I think one of the best expressions of devotion, as far as this old man is concerned, is do as I say. And how do I mean that? I mean that when I walk in here, I see you facing the wall. If I see any of you come in here, especially when it's not even time to face the wall. I come in here and you're sitting down, you're training your mind, then you can't pay me a higher compliment than that. Because that's how it's done. I mean, the studying is good. We need that. We need to talk. I need to talk. I need to sit up here and respond to questions. We need to study the sutras together, study the teachings down through the centuries that are conceptual structures that point to that which is not a concept, awakening, a realization. So yes.
Isn't it the ego that's devoted also?
No. The ego thinks it's devoted. That's why it's called ego. Look closely. Devotion with actual devotion is there's no pat on the back for ego. Ego's not feeling like it's particularly doing things the right way. It's more of a feeling of hopelessness that you're not willing to cover up anymore. You're not willing to run from. You're willing to sit there and be genuine. Willing to do that. If I come in here and see you sitting, or I know that you're sitting, or I just said, you should probably go into retreat, and you say, okay, I'm going to do that, and you go into retreat, then I know what that's like. I've done a lot of that. I know that that's a really difficult thing to do. To hold still, just to sit on a cushion and look at the wall for an hour, or 2 hours, or 3 hours, or all day. Very difficult. It feels, to ego, it feels hopeless because it's so much with so little reward. The reward that you're getting is not what ego is looking for. The ego can't spend that kind of reward. The kind of reward that you are getting is reality. And reality is what? Not separate. Ego doesn't want to hear that. Your ego wants to hear how what I'm doing is worthwhile and so on. That's why it's sometimes called a mundane path, because you actually get credentials, you get evidence of your PhD, you get not wrong. It's just that it's a relative situation. Yes, sir.
Why do we need a teacher?
Well, if you don't have someone to help you a little bit, then we get tied up in what Trungpa Rinpoche calls spiritual materialism, which is actually getting into some kind of accomplishment mentality, some kind of thing where we're actually feel like we're getting ahead, pushing the negative things back, and we're getting to more positive things. And the teacher, and the self-deception that happens there is very circular. We come back and around, and then we feel like we're getting somewhere, and then that falls apart, and then we secure ourselves by talking to ourselves or talking to other people. The teaching person will help you because if you bring that to him or her, they will mirror back to you what's actually going on. How does it look to you? You've been a student for several years. Why would you say you need a teacher? In your own words, of course. Don't use my words.
To keep me from thinking I'll accomplish anything.
Yeah, sometimes I say, the way I would say to people, if I notice that they're doing something really well, I'll describe it. I'll say, you chant the sutras very well. That's not a compliment. It's a description. In the same way, I would say you're really very confused. You're buying into your own self-deception. That's not a criticism. It's just a description of what is being seen. It's apparently come to an end again.
What is the balance or the relationship or role between the teacher and the student? It's not complete. You can't just rely on the teacher to do anything for you. But what is that balance of, I don't know how to put it, between the teacher and the student? How is that relationship balanced where you're open but not becoming dependent?
Well, I think it's very unique for each teacher-student relationship is like no other. I don't have a lot of students. I have a few, but none of them. I feel like a completely different person every time I sit in front of someone, because I'm relating to them where they're at. Just my style is very much about that. It's not so much about having hundreds and hundreds of students because I have this incredible charisma. It's obvious I don't have charisma. We'll just say, oh no, you have tremendous charisma. Don't correct me. But it's a combination of everything. It's actually, I like to say it this way, and it's not often you hear it this way. It's very mutual. Everyone is already awake. It's just that the teaching person knows that, and the people who are students don't realize it. They have an inkling or a clue, and everyone's inkling or clue is a little bit different than everybody else's. Sometimes it manifests as kind of a bravado, and sometimes it manifests as really strong intellectual understanding. Sometimes it manifests as some kind of mock humility. And sometimes it manifests, you could go on and on. And when it manifests as reality, then the mind of the teacher and the mind of the student are no longer separate. You really realize what the teacher actually was, that they're nobody. They're no solid being. Every time someone comes in front of this old man, I'm that person. So if you think you're looking at Someone else, you're not, in the strict sense of the word. Yes, sir.
How can someone relate to their teacher if they don't get to see them that often?
It just varies. You can. I was talking to someone, JD. I was talking to JD about. I have a student in New Zealand that I've Skyped with once, and we've talked back and forth on the email several times. But I feel very, very close to her, even though I know she's not been staying in touch. But Rinpoche says, Trungpa Rinpoche says in the Myth of Freedom, and when I first read this many years, in 1975, I think it was, I didn't quite understand what that meant. It sounded like a little aggressive when he said, the Bodhisattva is like an alligator, or crocodile, I think it was. He never lets go of you. Once he's got a hold of you, or she, never let go of you. And that's very true. Once you're functioning as a teaching person on the level on a Mahayana, in a Mahayana context, you never let go of anyone. And you actually respect whatever they do. I mean, if they may go away, you actually respect it. You may miss them because they've gone another way, but you don't go out and try to correct them necessarily, unless they come this way, and then they're operating. Sometimes people are having a kind of difficulty that's extremely personal. So you have to relate to that person where they're at, not just try to get them to be different. You have to relate to people exactly where they're at. Like sometimes when occasionally children come in with their parents and sit and for like 3 minutes, and then they start to wiggle. And the parent quite often will say, "Don't hold still," thinking that that's appropriate. But what is actually appropriate in that situation is they're children, so they wiggle. Well, that's what they do. So you don't correct them. On the other hand, if they were really outrageous and noisy, I'd correct them. But I would get up and say, don't, be quiet, or don't make a lot of noise, or maybe you should go down in the basement, get a whole box of toys down there. So I might say that. At the same time, if the child, here again, relating to people where they're at, if an 8-year-old really is interested and has some curiosity about meditation, and they start to show that, then they say, I can't hold still. Then I would say to them, hold still for a minute. I would say, count your breath 1 to 10. As soon as you get to 10, then wiggle. And then wiggle for as long as you feel like wiggling. And I would deliberately show them, wiggle. They usually laugh at that too. And then I would say, then go back and hold still for another 10 breaths or 5 breaths. The 5 breaths is a long time for an 8-year-old. But it gives them a feeling of connecting with this. It's all about connecting. And of course, the main thing I always say is it's all about awareness. But if there's some kind of connection, then the awareness tends to open up to the connection, whatever it may be. Meditating for, and this person may not come back, may never come back, or they may, when they're 19 or 20, may think about meditation or something. So there's always some kind of connection happening. My daughter started meditating when who's now in her 40s, and started meditating when she was 3. She actually sat still. I looked at her. She was meditating, and then she stopped, and she didn't start again until she was 16. She was living in Japan then. And then she started again. So, the discontinuity of everything has its own kind of dynamic, and it's good to be aware of it, but not necessarily. Is that someone snoring or a lawnmower?
Oh, it's
a chainsaw. Okay. But maybe somebody's sleeping around you. You were waiting for me to catch on. Yes, Michael.
Could you talk about the difference between relating to someone and just perceiving them with your own perception?
Relating to someone?
Well, you said you you have to relate to the person.
This could be the same thing. If we're talking about, if I'm sitting and someone wants to have a meditation interview, which is kind of a deliberately kind of formal, so you can actually not spend too much time just talking about the neighbors, with the chainsaw. You actually sit down, you bow, and make it kind of formal. So the mind tends to follow the body follows the mind. So we do something with the body. That's what all this formality is about. We do something with the body that the mind kind of takes on that form for a temporary amount of time. We do that, and then when the person presents or asks a question, or might say, "I don't have any questions," and I might say, "Well, that's all right. So how are you doing?" And then I have a question. How are you doing? Well, not too well, or not, or doing really well. This is going. We might get off into something else. So I'm listening, but I'm waiting. My function and my interest is into helping with that person's suffering. That's my interest. They don't have to become a Buddhist. They don't have to receive jukai, ask for precepts. I'm relating to them right where they're at. I'm delighted if they want to ask for precepts, and of course I will turn them down immediately, because they in our tradition that quite often happens, and I think it makes sense that you shouldn't do anything unless you have to. And so sometimes people do it out of some kind of initial interest that is going to probably burn out pretty quick. So, but if you have to ask several times, then you're probably pretty serious about it. So, yeah, is that good?
Well,
I agree with you.
I was thinking that you use that word relating. And it seemed to me as a student when I first came in, there was all this perception, which I think is similar to what he's saying, that I had.
What's your question?
What do you do to overcome that perception?
Overcome what? Preconceptions?
Yes, preconception.
You don't have to overcome anything if you see what it is. Anytime you overcome, we're looking at warfare. You don't have to go to war with anything. So all you have to do is see the negativity, or see the lack of clarity around it, or see that it looks like a preconception about someone or something. All you have to do is watch preconceptions. If you do, then seeing preconception is what? Clarity. If you see the preconception, if you see the way you're deceiving yourself, if you see that you're self-centered, if you see that you're narcissistic, if you see that you're full of shit, this is clarity. You don't have to get rid of that. Why would you get rid of something you're clear about? If you're very clear about it, the energy that it is drawing from somewhere will start to die down after a while. It may take a week, it may take 6 weeks, it may take a month, it may never go away. But if it's real clarity, you don't care. You're not interested in getting rid of anything, because everything is included. Yes.
If ego is an illusion, is this not separate or separate?
Nothing is separate. Anything you can come up with, whether it's ego or an illusion, the illusion is not separate.
But how can something not be separate if it's not real?
In its unreality, it's not separate. Everything is unreal except reality, which is real. That is not all that clear, so you should continue to ask questions. I know, me either. Yes, Jeff.
This seems connected to me, but it may not to anybody else. But I was reading a book by Katagiri Roshi, and he was talking about Buddha nature in terms of impermanence, which I thought was interesting, because it seems like a lot of times when Buddha nature is described, there could be kind of an aura of permanence about it. And he was even talking about how Abhidharma says that, there's like all these mind moments that arise and pass away in the blink of an eye and all that. And that's Buddha nature. I just thought it was interesting because it's coming at it from a different angle than
Which one of Category's books was this in?
I just got it at a used bookstore. It's not, you have to say something. It's something silence. maybe?
Returning to Silence.
Yeah. And it's there. I think it is the little talk called Buddha Nature, if I'm not mistaken, or Impermanence, one of the two.
So what's your question?
Well, just is that something that makes sense to you, or
No,
you don't think so?
but I'm not correcting you.
No, I'm asking for your, because it just sounded strange. I mean, I don't usually hear Zen people talking like that about Buddha nature with impermanence. It seems like so.
Okay.
I want your feedback, or
I don't have any feedback,
okay, all right,
but I can answer a question
yeah.
because the feedback is, I don't know. I don't know. If you have a question about
Does it
it,
sound unusual to hear it described that way?
well, I'd have to read the whole context of Buddha nature is basically not discontinuous moments of anything, but it's also not separate from them.
Mm-hmm.
So Buddha nature is, once it's realized, then everything is included, including so-called delusion. Delusion and awakening or Buddha nature are not separate. But as long as you're embroiled in delusion, you're grasping at this and rejecting that. In other words, you're at war with your world. But when you realize that nothing is separate from anything else, then the ultimacy of that realization includes everything and sees that nothing is solid anywhere, or there are no particles left anywhere.
I was wondering if it could be seen in relation to, let's say, aspects of Buddha nature. Like, it seems that I remember reading about Buddha nature actually manifesting through the defilements and things like that. So it could manifest through impermanence also, or not.
Maybe.
I mean, is Buddha nature always having to refer to like the absolute perception of, or is it like all through all the other stuff too?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's through all the other stuff too?
Mhm.
Okay.
What is the importance of asking questions of the teacher?
So you can hear what the answer will be. And realize that regardless of what the answer is, you should contemplate it rather than immediately disagree with it or agree with it based on your preconceptions. Yes, sir.
How important is the answer?
The most important thing about asking the questions of the teacher is that you're talking to a teacher. You're bringing your confusion, your lack of understanding, even if you read all of the sutras and you've studied the tantras and you're very smart and very accomplished and have done lots of retreats and whatever it may be. The most important thing is that you're actually standing, sitting, looking at, talking to a teaching person, and you're asking a question. You need to ask questions until there aren't any more. It's not about the answers. Yes, sir.
It can be really humiliating to become a student.
It was for me.
And becoming like a beginner, not knowing anything anymore.
Yeah, after studying Buddhism and other disciplines for about 12 years, it was very humiliating to meet my teacher, yes, because the humiliation was realizing I was going to have to start over.
Is there a way that we can become a beginner with our teacher?
Yeah, you just said it, zero away.
Say that again.
He said, is there a way? And I said, you just said it, zero away. I know it's not funny, but I have to just take whatever I can get. So, but I think the way is to continue to ask, relate to the teacher, and do as the teacher tells you or suggests. We try to make it a suggestion, but anybody that's functioning as a teacher, we all know that you have to do as you're told on some level. But you can't do as you're told if you don't trust or at least give the person the benefit of the doubt. You have to see, well, is what is my judgment of what that teacher is doing? Is that my projection? Or am I actually seeing that this guy is nuts and I don't want to talk to him anymore? Or this person is full of themselves and is narcissistic and is just looking to magnetize people and get people to worship them.
How can you possibly tell if that person is a really good con artist or really awake?
How did you do it? Is your teacher a con artist? How do you know? How do you know?
The only thing that comes up is I know that you can help me see the truth.
Okay. Somehow you know that, and I think it arises for everyone in whatever time it takes. Some people are ups. That might not happen. Quite often, it can be somebody that you just have a heart connection with, and you know that it can be scary and choiceless at the same time. Scary, and you don't really want to do it because you'd rather. On one level, you wish you hadn't met that person, and on another level, you're completely feel very lucky to have met that person. And at some point, when you ask the person to function as your teacher, first of all, you shouldn't do it unless you have to. And once you do, then you should stick with that situation and not particularly tell that person or listen to the way that person is teaching you, and then decide that way of teaching is not so good. I'd really prefer to occasionally have people that try to tell me that the way I'm doing this is not appropriate. I need to do it some other way.
What should you look at before you ask the teacher to be your teacher?
Well, you should scrutinize them very closely and ask them the hardest questions you can. Try to, I'm not saying deliberately go in and embarrass them. Go in and, plant firecrackers in their shoes, or let's see how they handle a pie in the face. See if they're, if they feel humiliated or. So I'm not saying deliberately do that, but watch how they function all the time. Watch or listen. Sometimes somebody can just talk. You could talk to somebody. All I had to do was meet my teacher. I figured the jig was up when I read his book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. But when I saw him face to face, I knew I was going to have to start from scratch. I was going to have to start over. So I was very happy. I looked like I was going to get to have some help doing this that I've been studying for 12 years. And at the same time, it was a combination of being that and being kind of frightened because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to deceive him. So, probably different for everyone. Again, I say the same thing. I often say, don't. If you meet somebody and you think that you're not sure whether they're your teacher or not, they're probably not. Probably not. Go look around or look for longer and see if it changes. It'll either get stronger or the connection will slowly, and you'll see that it's actually preconceptions that are helping you keep your distance. Your own self-centeredness, you're protecting it by projecting onto them that they're bad, that they mistreat people, that they molest people, that they are self-centered and trying to promote their own self-interest at the expense of students or what. I mean, there's everything on the internet. There's everything. There are all kinds of teachers that are being scolded and revealed. And I'm not saying it's incorrect. There's probably a lot of shenanigans going on. Yes. Here.
What, in view of that, what would be appropriate boundaries for the teacher-student relationship?
Boundaries are a good idea. The teaching person, if he or she is realized and is functioning as that their motivation is just to fundamentally help you where you're at, rather than try to get control of you. the boundary is natural for that person, but they aren't necessarily functioning in such a way that will be. It isn't like they're functioning in such a way that they're make sure they don't offend you or send you running the other way. That they're not trying to make sure they don't lose you as a student. They may be functioning in such a way that's scary to you. And the boundary from the point of view of the student, do you have a specific question about that?
Well, just in general, I guess, you mentioned about some teachers that maybe take advantage of students in various ways.
You're not going to be able to avoid that. It's not like we can be suddenly secure and everybody's totally obeying the precepts. Causes and conditions that are arising as individuals are extremely crazy and volatile and magnetic, and you're not going to be able to make karma do mind. Do what you, so you have to, it's risky to relate with this world in any way, to do anything that's even in the boundaries of very tight conformity of consensus reality that some of us, all of us are operating in some regards. It's even risky there. Venus?
You had earlier said that the whole world, like everything around you can be your teacher.
It can. You want me to talk about that? So the only way the whole world is going to be your teacher is you have to first start out with a human teacher. And I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, but there's probably damn few. We all know about them. Yuji Krishnamurti, Ramana Maharshi, who's the woman who, Byron Katie, who had a spontaneous awakening. The other ones aren't coming to me, but some people, just because of the causes and conditions that arise, somehow the whole ego structure breaks down and they see reality. What they see is usually very shocking because they have no practice leading up to it. So therefore, they have some people actually lose the names of things. And what happens if you have a progressive path leading up to that slow situation where you start to see reality? Then you have some kind of context for it because you've been studying the concepts and you realize that things do not have names. A thing is not its name. So you begin to see things without the names of them. You see things without the projection of them. And in order to do this, it seems to be necessary to have a teaching person, some in the Tibetan tradition called a guru, the Indian tradition called a guru. It just means teacher. That's all that means. It just has a lot of fancy preconceptions on it. Introduce you to your world. Introduce you, as Trungpa Rinpoche says. He says, you need to do it yourself. You do it yourself, but you need someone there to watch you do it. You need someone there to see you do that, awaken to what is real. And when that reality happens, then everything has been said in the tradition. Everything is preaching the Dharma. Everything is the Dharma. Everything you look at is dependently arisen. Everything you see is the Four Noble Truths. Everything you see is suffering, and is desire or craving, and cessation, and the path leading to that cessation. Everything is showing that how that structure works, and that can happen. But it seems to be necessary to have someone show you how to work with the world that's in here. Sit down and look at this world and watch what this world is doing. And then as you do that, you'll start to see more clearly what's happening out here. Seems necessary that we first have to cut through the self-centeredness, or see that the self-centeredness is unreal. And the teaching person, along with the teachings, along with the awareness practice, those combination of things, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the three jewels, supports that kind of path. So probably it could happen, but it's probably not going to happen with you trying to think your way to it. Like saying everything it looks just like me. Thinking, how could I actually be the light bulb? You see, not be the light bulb. So when people do that, how do I know? I did it. I tried to do it with drugs back in the 60s. I did everything I could do to try to understand what this is about. The only way that it stopped being circular is when I met my teacher. It stopped being circular, and I ended up on the floor looking at my mind. I did that for, it's been over 40 years ago now. Yes, sir. Jeff.
Someone asked earlier about relationship with a teacher that you don't see that often. Wasn't your case with Trump Rinpoche kind of similar to that? I mean,
Yes.
You didn't spend a whole lot of time with him.
I had 4 face-to-face interviews with him. I don't know how long they were, but they were long enough. As long as I wanted to stay there in front of him.
But you felt some kind of ongoing connection.
Well,
Must be.
Completely, yes. I felt really, it got stronger as time went on. Very strong devotion to him as a teacher, even though he got very bad press because he drank and they say he chased women, but I think more like women chased him.
Well, that was something I didn't want to ask about that.
You should.
But, I did know a little bit about the situation toward the end there.
I know a lot about it.
Yeah, so I'm kind of wondering.
What do you want to know?
Well, how you dealt with that when that started. I mean,
Devotion trumps all. I'm not saying he didn't have difficult karma that manifested itself as drinking or as any other thing you want to bring up that looked like it was happening. On the other hand, the power behind that particular person was compassion. I mean, I saw it this direction. I saw it with everyone he talked to. And if you talk to anyone who was a student of his, that's what you're going to see, is that he gave up his personal life to help others.
But would you say that the bad habits that manifested themselves were still bad places that he had, that he wasn't a totally realized being?
Oh, he was totally realized.
Totally.
Completely. He was not even existent anymore. I like the way you say
So
yeah, you really buying into this, right?
well, so why are those behavior patterns there?
It is a projection. It is a projection. I'm not trying to say that he was an angel. I'm saying, but it's a projection. You have to look at the projections. You have to look at the projection of what we think something is. There's no way you can know what he went through. There's no way, Jeff, that you can know what his karma was in 1938 before he was born. There's no way you can know what karma you are headed for with the trajectory of your lifetime or anyone else. And there's no way you can know that. The causes and conditions, the way we usually handle causes and conditions is this causes that. Something moving through space, hitting something solid causes a sound. We think cause, effect, cause, effect. But that's about, that's, if you had every book that's ever been published, just an example, that is a period. That's all you've got. That's all you've got. All the causes and conditions are just incredibly vast. And try to look at a tree, the example I'm always using, you look at a tree, you can see the tree, but you can't see its roots. You look at a human being, you can't see his or her roots unless you begin to see your own. And if you see your own, then you start to see other people's roots. If you want to see your past lives, go look in the mirror. Because they're all showing up right here. This is karma here. And your mind, of course. And you notice that even 3 people all born to the same mother and father, all totally different. I mean, sometimes it doesn't even look like you're out of the same family. Sometimes they're not. But it's so vastly different. And he was an extremely exceptional teacher. And he had very, very powerful teachers in Tibet that helped him from the time he was very tiny to realize. And he was thrown out of the structure that he was born into as a tulku of the medieval tradition of Tibetan lamas into this culture. I think it was very difficult. I know he contemplated suicide at one point. It was a difficult time for him, but he somehow turned things around in such a way that he was able to dedicate his life to helping others. And if it weren't for him, this person would not be here. Yes, sir.
Would suicide for someone that is realized be circular?
Everything is circular. You caught me there. Yeah, everything is circular. Anything you do is a circle. It's called samsara. So if you do something, then that's karma, and that causes more circles and eddies and curves and swirls. But if you do nothing, yes, go ahead. I'm ready. So is that it?
You're just going to answer it.
I want to hear your question.
Oh, what is not circular?
Doing nothing. But the kind of nothing I'm doing isn't like laziness or laissez-faire or nihilism or any other ism. It's seeing that there's fundamentally no specific thing that can be done unless you're doing that. Unless you're doing that. So if you're in a state of not doing anything and you find yourself doing something, then that's coming out of reality. And if you're interested in that, then that's what this path is about. It's called non-duality, and you can't wrap your conceptual mind around it. I can't. And when I talk about it, it's sounds like I'm confused. Yes, sir.
In your relationship with your teacher,
Yes.
was kindness important?
Kindness?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or compassion? How did that manifest itself between you?
When I was really, really having difficulty, he was extremely kind. And I could feel it. Even though I was very frightened of him, all I was getting from him was kindness. I was not getting any scary Vajra person. It was powerful, overwhelmingly powerful. More.
Was there a lack of kindness before that? Or was there an understanding of it?
I don't know. It's getting too conceptual to make any sense. Not a criticism. I'm just saying.
No, I didn't take it as a
Sheldon,
criticism.
yeah, question.
One of the most difficult things, it seems like, about being confused is that we have this constant desire to know stuff.
Yes.
And it kind of seems like it gets in the way of just about everything.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's irritating.
Is the role of the teacher important in working at that?
Yeah, the role of the teacher, he, she can help you see the way in which you keep going in circles with your mind. I see it in people all the time. And if I'm given permission, I can step into that. But sometimes when I step into that, people get irritated and they project onto me or onto the situation. They don't like it. So they really have not. So even though they said, will you be my teacher? They don't really mean it. You can be my teacher until you do something that I don't like. It is a really, really big picture. It's really big. It's not just our little idea. Well, he said this and they did that, and then I did, and then I said this. Who is he to say that back to me? When the self begins to break down, the world just becomes completely, not just this world, but it's just vast. And it's so vast, and this is the way Rinpoche talked about this, is that when you start to realize that, It's like you're a little grain of sand. It's like you're a little speck somewhere. Hi.
Question from Stu, who's with Shane.
Yes.
Stu wants to know how you find a teacher.
I don't know. There's the old saying we all heard, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. But you could also say, when the teacher is ready, the student appears. And I often say to people, don't teach unless you have to. The only way you're going to have to teach is if people start treating you like a teacher. And then you're probably going to have to teach. But you'll find out right away what that's about when you meet students that don't like the way you teach. And it's hard to keep being a teacher. So in the case of someone like Stu, he's in California. There's got to be 750 billion teachers out there in California, after all. So he should just kind of reach out and get a hold of one. It's like being in a sea in the ocean with minnows. Teachers everywhere. In our situation, we have the internet, we have books, and we have people who are teaching. You could read books by different teachers and see if there's someone who magnetizes. Quite often, the really famous teachers, like Dalai Lama or Dujang Rinpoche or Sakyong Minpam or Trungpa Rinpoche, have so many students that you can't get very close. On the other hand, it won't matter if it's the right teacher. It won't matter so much. You'll find a way to connect with them and get the teaching from them that you need. Yes, sir.
Just put my watch back.
Okay. Sheldon.
Going back to my original inspiration for coming here for doing this.
How long ago was that?
My original inspiration? 25 years ago, 26 years ago. I may not have known that.
Did you come here that long ago?
No, but that's where it started. That was the original inspiration.
All right, let's go to that. To study meditation, you're talking about. No?
No, I guess not.
Well, that's kind of what we're talking about, study Buddhism or meditation.
No, that's how I came here, though.
Well, what would you like to ask?
A lot of people probably end up here over that same situation, trying to stop killing myself with drugs, alcohol.
I hear you.
And so, it's been a long path to get to this part.
Yes.
And sponsorships in the program had a lot to do with my coming here. So it seems like there's some parallel
In
between,
AA.
right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some parallel between needing to have a sponsor and needing to have a teacher on this path.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference?
The path.
Between the sponsor and the teacher is the path.
It's a different path.
Okay. So what's your question?
The question is there some similarity? Is there some parallel between those
Sure.
things?
Yeah. Everything is working. One of the ways that I got here is I went to a psychiatrist and saw that they were crazier than I was. So I thought, no, that's not going to work. So now what? So I kept reading Alan Watts and Jiddu Krishnamurti and W.Y. Evans Wentz, and book after book, reading Jean-Paul Sartre, Kierkegaard, and any philosopher, psychologist, or anything I could try. I thought maybe I'll have to do it myself. And then I Then I met Cutting Through, my teacher, and all of that stopped, and I started practicing, studying under him. Time to finish done.
No.
Is that good? More? Any other questions? Yes, Shoka.
If someone hasn't met their teacher, is there something that they can do to help that process of finding a teacher?
Well, I think if they're looking for a teacher in Buddhism, there's books, and nowadays we have the internet. I just spent a lot of time reading books. And in 1973, I picked up a book by Trungpa, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, and it's about halfway through it, and I kind of knew already that this was what I was going to have to do, and it was very frightening to me. Of course, I just spent 12 years practicing spiritual materialism, doing everything I could do to be a wonderful spiritual person.
What were you scared of?
Yes. Yes.
Someone being revealed, seeing what a fool I am, seeing how self-centered I was, seeing how narcissistic I was, and how much in love with myself that I was. Yeah, that's and seeing how dishonest I was with myself, how dishonest I was with others.
So you were already aware of it.
Well, I was aware of it, but I thought I was doing a good job of hiding it. You know, and I thought, it's kind of like a ventriloquist. Nobody can see my lips move, so I must be safe back here behind my artificial me. But I knew that he would be able to see through. I felt like he's going to be able to see through, and he could. I mean, I could feel that. He didn't say that he could, but I knew he could. I just felt exposed, so I was frightened of that. I mean, it's like you want it, but you don't. You want it, but you don't, because it's going to be painful. It's like Trungpa Rinpoche says in his book. It's like you need surgery, and it's going to be painful. But you've got to go into the doctor, and that image is, of course, imperfect. But there's something to that. I should be afraid of being a fool, afraid of being exposed. Now that I know I'm a fool, I'm no longer afraid of making a fool of myself. I make a fool of myself all the time. Yes.
Were you still afraid with Kobun?
Well, Kobun, I had several teachers, but Kobun was the next really powerful teacher for me. I met him in 1990, and when I met him, Rinpoche had been dead for 3 years, so and I thought, Rinpoche's dead. Not really, but kinda. Not really. I don't want the guy to die, but I mean, he's gone, right? So now I can be, the accomplished person who studied, been in the retreat, and I've done hundreds of thousands of mantras and prostrations and all kinds of fancy spiritual practices. And knew a lot, had read a lot over the last 17 years where that happened. And but then I met Kobun, and Kobun wasn't buying it, and I knew it. And he basically, how would you say that? How would you say that? He ignored me. That's how it felt. I tried to present myself as somebody, and he wasn't having any part of it. He walked away. You could say, well, how could that possibly be a teaching? Wouldn't that have been too painful to be a teaching? No, that was exactly a teaching. It's just that he was extremely kind to me to be able to see what my issue and my problem was, and treat me in such a way that would deepen my spiritual path, deepen my spiritual practice, so I could continue to see more deeply into who this was and how full of shit I was. I can't think of any other way to say it other than it was very hard. And it was hard for years because I did not want to acknowledge what he had done. Yes, Jeff.
I was just curious how you met him. Did you know Michael Newhall before? And
Yeah, I met Michael Newhall just about before I had met everybody other than my mom and dad. Shoho Mike Newhall is the abbot of Jikoji Retreat Center in California, near Santa Cruz. And we met in art school in 1963 in Chicago. So we both had a together thing. And then he met Koben about the same time I met Rinpoche. A little bit later, I think he met Katagiri Roshi first, in 1973. And then, but I never met Koben. He never talked about it. So I was always talking about Rinpoche, but he never talked about it. So I'm not sure why. I have to ask him. But then one day in 1990, he showed up at my house with Koben. And
here in Michigan.
Yeah, right over here on Beetle Lake Road. And I didn't know he was coming. And that was 1990, so that was difficult. I mean, it was nice because I was still kind of pretending that I knew more about spiritual path than I actually did. And it's been 24 years ago. Yes.
Was that the first meeting? That's kind of when you hadn't been thinking. In fact, I remember you saying that you were pretty sure you were done with teachers. But then this meeting kind of just totally reversed that.
No, it didn't. No, not right away. I was still, the first thing he said to me when I met him was, "Where have you been?" And I immediately thought, well, what does he mean by that? Where have I been? I've been right here. What do you mean? But then I thought, what does he really mean by that? Does he know something I don't? Well, of course he knows something I don't. He knows I'm full of shit. He knew it right away. So I could tell more stories about it, but it just suffice it to say that it took a while for me to start to realize I really needed to ask him for precepts. I need to ask him to be my teacher. It took several years.
And I know we're getting to the end here,
That's all right.
but you perhaps were not that interested in Zen Buddhism per se before that?
I started in Zen.
Oh, I see.
My very first retreat was with Katagiri Roshi before I did any Tibetan stuff. I mean, I'd met Rinpoche, but I still was not sure. In fact, I went to see Katagiri to see. I said, before I get any stronger connection with Rinpoche, I need to go and talk to Katagiri. So I did. I went and I had Dokusan with Katagiri, and that's when I really started to get stronger that my teacher was Trungpa, not Katagiri. Now, I didn't meet Koben. Koben was out in California. Had I met Koben, who knows? I mean, you can speculate all the time.
That's when he was an assistant for Suzuki Roshi.
It was, yeah. And Katagiri and Suzuki Roshi had sent Katagiri back east to Minneapolis to start a Zen center there. And Koben was still in California, but Koben had a few students too. And we were only a couple years apart. Yes.
Does a teacher always know that something is a teaching? Like Koben ignoring you?
Did I know that was?
No, I'm wondering about.
Did he know he was teaching me?
Did he consciously know that he was teaching?
No, he's just functioning. And he may or may not. It's like I meet people quite often that I know I'm their teacher, but they may not know it. Maybe, and they may die without knowing it. I know that they have to come this way though. And don't misunderstand. I'm not promoting anything. I'm not saying, oh gee, somebody should, But quite often I meet people that I feel like I could help them if they would come this direction. But people are pretty full of themselves. Further question? Did I respond to your question? Or was there something else?
I don't know. I mean,
If someone else wanted to know the answer to your question, how would you ask it?
is a teacher always just functioning?
They're functioning at the same time they're living very, very personally. Not necessarily gotten rid of anything. Passion, aggression, and ignorance are still functioning just fine. But you know what the difference is? It's an amazing statement I'm about to make. Or you're going to make it. There's no solid self here. There's no solid, it's very ordinary. If I look out here, I see people listening, and if I look in here, I don't see anything. I don't see a solid being. But I did for most of my life. I did. Saw someone solid that needed protecting or promoting or defending. I no longer see that. I just see what I'm here to do, and that's to do this.
So was your answer that you function out of no motivation?
The motivation arises when the person talks. If you guys aren't here, I watch Netflix. Jeff?
So are there ever moments where you lapse into some self-centeredness?
All the time. But it's not real. So you don't have to get rid of something that's not real. If you see the self-centeredness as not real, then it's quite humorous and a little sad at the same time. It's a little sad because we spend so much time trying to defend this artificial person who can win or lose. We put so much stock in this person, and we see it's not real. It's a big relief. It's a big relief, but the identity can still be there or not. It's dependently arisen like everything else.
Is the sense of freedom greater and lesser at times, or is it always the same?
Yeah, it fluctuates, but it's there's still this embodied form which is subject to cause and effect and hailstorms. But the freedom is not freedom from something or to do something. It's a fundamental freedom, so that whatever happens, you're not separate from it. It's that kind of freedom. It's astonishingly. That's why they call it liberation. There's no more a self in the skandhas: form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness. There's no longer a self in passion, aggression, and ignorance. There's no longer a self in the 12 links on the chain of existence. Yes, sir.
Is that equanimity?
That is a word for it. Equanimity. Everything is totally balanced. And of course, the people say, "Well, how about the people who are starving in Africa?" Well, I don't like that. Bring them over here and we'll feed them. I mean, we can relatively do something about it, and perhaps you should be. Maybe that would be your balance. Or how about the people who are shooting people down in Charleston? Not good, but it's a craziness. It's not evil. It's someone who is causes and conditions have for this poor kind of pathetic situation. This person's done something really horrible. But the entire situation is still Buddha nature. Should we close now? Yeah, we went way over. So we'll dedicate the merit.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiro Sam Shi Son Fu Sam Moko Sam Moko the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita,